In this movie, we're going to take a look at one of the most exciting aspects of After Effects, in my opinion, and that is the effects. Now, there's about 200 or so effects in After Effects, so obviously we're going to only lightly scrape the surface here in this movie, but all the same, I think you'll see by the end of this movie how cool effects can really be. Take, for example, this project. I'm doing this surfer-like project, and I've got some water kind of moving along here in this lower third. And it looks like pretty believable water, but this is actually water that I created from scratch here in After Effects. As we look at the lower third composition a little bit more closely, we can see these different layers. Basically, this is a blue solid with a couple little layers of this water on top of it. And as we open up those compositions, we can see a little bit more closely that this is all the water is. If we select the layer and go to the Effect Controls panel, which is where we adjust effects, then we can see that there are two effects applied here, an effect called Fractal Noise and an effect called Colorama. If we click the effects icon here next to Colorama in the Effect Controls panel, it will take off the visibility of this effect. Boy, it looks a lot less attractive, doesn't it, without the colorizing? So basically, we add Fractal Noise, which is a cool pattern generator, add Colorama to colorize it, and then once we blend it all together, it looks pretty good. Actually, we need to turn Colorama back on here, and then it looks pretty good in our final result. Now, as I mentioned, kind of like the eye icon for layers, this effects icon controls the visibility for an effect. If you want to remove the visibility for all effects at once, you can come down here into the timeline, and with the switches area showing, click this effects icon. And now we see the content of our original layer. I'll turn those back on. In this case, we just want to start from scratch. So I'm going to turn off the visibility for this layer. I'm going to right-click somewhere in a blank area of the timeline, select New, Solid. Solids are used often with effects. Essentially what a solid is, it's just a huge area of color, just a flat area of pixels. That's all it is. Oftentimes we use solids with effects because effects have to be applied to a layer. You can't just apply an effect to your timeline. It has to actually go to a layer. But if you apply, let's say, an effect that creates like a fog type result, you don't want to apply it to a layer, even if you want the fog to exist in the layer, because it will completely replace the content of the layer it's applied to. So these solids are basically kind of like these dummy layers that we could dump a bunch of effects on and not have to worry about messing anything up. So I'm going to click OK here. Now we could apply effects in a couple different ways. We could select a layer and go to the effect menu at the top of the screen and select an effect from one of these categories. Now this method really isn't my preference. Reason being is that there are so many effects that you have to remember which categories each effect is in. A much better way to do this is to go to the Effects and Presets panel, and in this search field, click and type the name of an effect. And you can see as soon as I start typing, I'm going to type Turbulent Noise is what we're looking for. I'm going to select Turbulent Noise here. And you can see I didn't even have to type out Turbulent Noise. I type in TURB, and it shows me the results of all effects that have TURB in a row anywhere in their name. Now that we have access to this effect, we can apply it a couple different ways. We can drag and drop it into the composition panel. We can drag and drop it onto a layer in the timeline panel. Or, my personal preference, we could select a layer in the timeline panel and then just double click it here in the Effects and Presets panel. And again, the workflow is that we apply effects from the Effects and Presets panel and then edit the effect in the Effect Controls panel, typically docked on the left-hand side of the interface. Turbulent Noise and a similar effect called Fractal Noise are extremely versatile effects because they can create these random grayscale patterns. This is what created the water we looked at earlier. Here we're going to use Turbulent Noise to create a fiery effect. So I'm going to change the fractal type to Dynamic Twist. And I'm going to increase the contrast a lot. And I'm going to take down the brightness of the effect. Looking pretty good. Next, I'm going to open up the transform area. These transforms are similar to what you see in the layer transforms. I'm going to uncheck uniform scaling so that we could scale width and height independently. I'm next going to increase the height of this fire. It's starting to look a little fiery here. There's too much detail in this fire for me though. I'm going to come down to the complexity slider and drag it to the left to reduce the complexity. That looks better. To bring this effect to life, we adjust the evolution parameter. Click and drag this to the right to bring this fire to life. One of the things you need to keep in mind about turbulent noise and fractal noise is that these are grayscale pattern generators. So this doesn't look too much like fire because it's black and white. So what we need to do is come back to the Effects and Presets panel and add an additional effect on top of this effect. That's one of the things that really adds to the power of effects in After Effects. You can just keep piling one after another. So I'm going to select Colorama. Drag and drop to apply, or any of the other methods we covered before. And I'm going to open up the output cycle area. And under output cycle, I could choose Use Preset Palette. And from this dropdown, select a preset to use. Of course, in this case, I'm going to use fire. Hey, there we go. There's our fire. So now as I move this evolution parameter, we start to really see this fire take shape. Another powerful effect we'll look at briefly is the shatter effect. In the Effects and Presets panel, I'll do a search for shatter. If I apply shatter to this, I first need to go over to shatter in the Effect Controls panel. The view by default is just this working view that's not super attractive. So we want to change the view from wireframe and forces to rendered. And as we move out in time, we'll see that our fire is actually blowing up. You can apply this to any layer. As you can see, it's already animated for you. So you just hit the space bar and these pieces go flying. I'll back up here just a little bit. One of the great things about this effect as well is that if I open up camera position and adjust Y rotation, you'll see that this is actually a three-dimensional effect. These bricks are real 3D bricks. Now that's all I wanted to show you with effects, but let me show you one other thing about the Effects and Presets panel. If we come over here, notice that we cannot see any other effects until we get rid of these search results. So click this X to see all of the categories of effects here. And just keep in mind that these categories are very descriptive of what these effects do. If you're looking for something to distort or manipulate an image, open up Distort. You can see all the different effects here for adjusting, manipulating, transforming, warping, and that type of thing to a layer. Same thing with color correction. There's even audio effects. There's effects to create simulations, like we see with Shatter here, that attempt to mimic things that happen in the real world. So feel free to play and explore, experiment, and to discover what's here in the world of effects.